Classic Movies. In Search of a Different Christmas Movie by Judy Dungey. This article was read by the author.
The Great Rupert, aka The Christmas Wish, 1950. Stars Jimmy Durante, Tom Drake, Queenie Smith, Terry Moore, Jimmy Conlon, Chick Chandler, Frank Orth, and Rupert the Squirrel. Directed by Irving Pichel and produced by George Powell. In trying to find a Christmas movie to review, I discovered an obscure movie that nevertheless often features in many lists of classic Christmas films, The Great Rupert, 1950, about a performing squirrel. I viewed it on YouTube. This was a mistake. It was barely watchable. Scratched, dark and blurry, fuzzy sound and abysmal stop-action special effects. It stars Jimmy Durante, however, and for that reason alone, I persevered. The first act takes place at Christmas time, so that's why it's classed as a Christmas movie, and it does include a few songs and a bit with a Christmas tree, but I couldn't see that it was a real Christmas movie, and I decided I would not write about it here. My idea of Christmas movie comes from films like It's a Wonderful Life or Miracle on 34th Street, or even Home Alone, movies that are actually about Christmas. So a starving song and dance squirrel was a bridge too far. However, puzzled as to why such an atrocious movie should be included on so many best-of lists, I did a bit more research. What I found was an army of ordinary movie lovers who adored The Great Rupert, watching it every year. Words like charming, sweet, and quirky were used over and over by these film aficionados. What? The film I saw wasn't any of those things. What was going on? Finally, I found that the film had been renamed, colorized, digitized, and released on DVD in 2003 as The Christmas Wish and available to rent on Amazon Prime. I'd been watching the old, tired version, so I spent $3 rental and watched The Christmas Wish, and it was chalk and cheese. Suddenly, I was watching a charming, if silly, Christmas movie. Not a remake, just gussied up. I usually hate colorized film, but this was different. What was once old-fashioned and dull now seemed to sparkle, and I felt much more invested in the characters, since I could actually see them clearly now. The story starts with a struggling vaudevillian, Joe Mahoney, played by Jimmy Conlon, introducing his latest act, The Great Rupert, a dancing, skipping squirrel, to Phil Davis, played by Chick Chandler, a booking agent. Joe has great hopes this will change his life because an act like this comes along only once in a million years. However, Phil tells him that Rupert is just not box office. Next day, Joe leaves his humble unit, promising his landlord, Frank Orth, he will come back one day and repay the 3 months' rent owing. He takes Rupert to the park and sends him back to the wild, saying sadly, "You're just not box office." He meets an old vaudevillian friend, Louis Amendola, Jimmy Durante, and his wife, played by Queenie Smith, and daughter, Rosalinda, played by Terry Moore, who desperately needs new shoes, by the way. They too are homeless, and when they discover that Joe's rental is now vacant, they rush to take it over, especially knowing that Joe was able to get away with not paying. At the flat, they meet the aforementioned landlord's son, tuba-playing composer Pete Dingle, Tom Drake, who is immediately smitten by Rosalinda and lets them rent the place without leaving a deposit, much to the chagrin of his Scrooge-like father, Frank, who lives in the adjoining unit. Frank receives a letter notifying him that a gold mine he part owns has come in, and he will be receiving a cheque for $1,500 every week from now on. Not trusting banks, he hides the money in the walls of the upstairs bedroom. Meanwhile, Rupert the Squirrel has not fared well in the wilds of the local park and has come back to his old residence and store of nuts in the walls of the upstairs bedroom. Downstairs, Mrs. Amendola, overcome by weariness at her poverty, prays to the Lord for help to buy Rosalinda's new shoes, just at the moment that Frank is stuffing his money into Rupert's nest. Rupert, incensed at the intrusion, throws the money through a hole in the other wall into the Amendola's flat, so that all the money comes floating down, and Mrs. Amendola thinks her wish has been answered in a Christmas miracle, a miracle that continues every week at the same time. Events arising from the sudden influx of so much money takes the film on an imaginative journey involving the entire community. A romantic triangle develops between Rosalinda, Pete and Phil, and Louis's activities somehow attract the attention of the FBI, the police, and of course the IRA. The several strands of storyline combine in a surprising whole that culminates when the house is burned to the ground. By the way, if you don't know Jimmy Durante, he was a famous song and dance man of the 30s, 40s and 50s. His enormous nose led to him being known as Schnozzle Durante. His big hit was a song called Inka-Dinka-Doo, and his version of As Time Goes By from Casablanca became a staple. He had a hit radio show, and during the fire scene in Rupert, he yells, "Save the radio! I don't want to miss the Jimmy Durante show." The film was George Pal's first effort at stop-motion effects, a tool he used throughout his career, notably in a raft of 50s fantasy and sci-fi standards. This alone marks the film as important, although special effects in Rupert are minimal. This is a really nice Christmas movie, if rather dated, but whatever you do, don't watch The Great Rupert for free on YouTube. Pay the $3 and watch The Christmas Wish.